Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Mercer County, Georgia. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the autumn of 1903, Willow Creek, Georgia. The summer rains had been unrelenting that year. The red clay turned to slick mud that clung to boots and wagon wheels alike. Fields flooded, cellars filled with brackish water, and the small town cemetery on Prescott Hill began to sink. Even the oldest gravestones, those weathered markers dating back to the Civil War, tilted at precarious angles as the saturated earth shifted beneath them. Some locals took this as an omen, though few spoke of it directly. What no one mentioned publicly was that every 40 years, almost to the day, Willow Creek suffered unusual flooding patterns. Historical records meticulously kept by the Presbyterian minister, Reverend Isaiah Thornton, documented similar rainfall anomalies in 1863, 1823, and as far back as 1783, when the first white settlers established homesteads along the Ochahaw River. Each flooding event corresponded with disappearances, livestock at first, then children, always during the peak of the rains, always without witnesses. The Muskogee tribes that once inhabited the region had their own name for the Ocheha, Waiga Unahi, which anthropologists from Atlanta University later translated as voice in the water. According to tribal legends, collected and transcribed by Professor Elliot Sanger in 1887, the river itself would occasionally rise to claim what belonged to it, what had been promised in an ancient pact, forgotten by all but the water itself. The rainfall of 1903 broke records documented since the county's founding in 1832. Local historian Morris Fulton noted in his weather journal that by September's end, Willow Creek had seen 67 days of precipitation, nearly double the seasonal average. The Ochahaw River swelled beyond its banks, transforming what had once been gentle farmland into vast, murky lakes. Water crept into places long kept dry, saturating soil that hadn't felt moisture in decades. Fulton's private correspondence with fellow weather observer Clarence Jenkins in neighboring Sumter County reveals a more troubling observation, one never published in the official meteorological reports. "The water moves wrong," he wrote on September 18, 1903. "It flows against gravity in certain spots, particularly near the old Campbell plot. I have witnessed puddles moving uphill. The drops on my window travel horizontally. I know how this sounds, but I swear on my reputation that what I document is accurate." County officials, led by Commissioner Harold Blackwood, ordered emergency drainage measures along River Street, where several homes had reported water seeping through their foundation stones. Blackwood, a third-generation Willow Creek resident, understood the severity of the situation better than most. His grandfather had served as sheriff during the floods of 1863 and had left behind a sealed journal that Harold only opened after the rains began that summer. The journal, now preserved in the Georgia State Archives, restricted collection, contains observations too disturbing for Blackwood to have shared with his constituents. One passage, dated October 9, 1863, reads, "The Hinson child was the third to vanish this month. Found her rag doll floating in a puddle 2 miles from where she was last seen, dry as bone despite the water. Mother claims to hear daughter calling from beneath the kitchen floor. When we removed the boards, we found only saturated earth that smelled of copper and milk. The crying continued even as we dug. It never grew louder, never grew fainter, no matter how deep we went." The Smith residence, a modest 2-story colonial with weather-beaten shutters, was among those selected for immediate attention. The house stood out not for its grandeur, but for its peculiar placement, built closer to the river than prudence would suggest, yet never having reported flooding until that fateful autumn of 1903. It occupied land that had remained conspicuously vacant for decades after the Campbell family tragedy, despite the prime riverside location. Land records from 1892 show that Dr. Jonathan Smith purchased the property for 1/3 the market value of comparable lots, The seller, Willow Creek First National Bank, had acquired it through foreclosure after the previous 3 owners abandoned the property without explanation, each within a year of purchase. The deed transfer to Smith bears an unusual notation in the margin: buyer informed of property history. Proceeds at own risk. This conditional sale was unprecedented in county real estate transactions. What risk the notation referred to remains unclear in official documentation. However, bartender Ezekiel Monroe, whose establishment sat across from the county courthouse, reported in his 1908 memoir that he overheard Blackwood warning Smith about the purchase. That ground wasn't meant for living on. Monroe quotes Blackwood as saying, "Some earth remembers what's been done to it." Smith allegedly laughed off the warning, citing scientific rationalism over what he termed backwoods superstition. The team assigned to the drainage sector, 4 laborers under foreman Thomas Caldwell, began excavation near the home's southern corner, where the water table had risen highest. Caldwell, a veteran of such work, had overseen similar projects throughout the county for nearly 15 years. His field logs, preserved in the Mercer County Historical Archives, detail the routine nature of their initial approach. Standard trenching, 3 feet depth, clay consistency as expected given rainfall, preparations for French drain installation underway. What Caldwell omitted from his official report but later confided to his brother-in-law Reverend Michael Hartley was the unusual behavior of his instruments when placed against the Smith foundation. His compass spun erratically, and his brass plumb line swung in circular motions rather than settling into a straight vertical drop. These anomalies occurred only along the southern wall, precisely where the kitchen stood above. The family, widow Sarah Smith, her mother-in-law Eliza, and young daughter Mary, age 10, had lived in relative solitude since the passing of Jonathan Smith some 3 years prior. A respected physician, Jonathan had been found dead in his examination room, his journal open to a half-written entry, his pen still wet with ink. The coroner determined natural causes: a sudden failure of the heart. The family never questioned it publicly. The town barely whispered about it privately. Examination of death certificates from 1900 reveals an unusual pattern of heart failures throughout Mercer County that autumn, 17 cases in September alone, compared to the typical 2 or 3. County Coroner Walter Phillips noted the anomaly in his quarterly report, but attributed it to atmospheric conditions related to excessive humidity. The deaths predominantly affected middle-aged men, with Jonathan Smith being the youngest at 38. Church records from First Baptist reveal that Jonathan Smith had begun attending evening prayer services in August 1900, despite having previously identified as agnostic. Reverend Hartley's pastoral journal, donated to the church archives after his death in 1921, recalls Smith's increasingly agitated demeanor during these visits. Dr. Smith attends faithfully, but seems not to hear the sermons. He asks repeatedly about protecting one's home from evil influences. When I pressed him on the nature of his concerns, he spoke of voices beneath the floorboards that should not exist. I recommended prayer and ventilation of the house, suspecting coal gas might be causing auditory hallucinations. Sarah Smith, once a fixture at church socials and market days, had withdrawn following her husband's passing. Neighbors described her as altered, though accounts varied on the precise nature of the change. Millicent Bradford, who ran the general store, told the Mercer County Chronicle in a rare interview years later, "She stopped looking people in the eye after Jonathan went, always staring at the ground, like she was searching for something she'd dropped, and she kept Mary so close, wouldn't let that child more than an arm's length away." Sarah's household accounts, maintained meticulously in a ledger recovered during the 1972 Historical Society assessment, show increasing expenditures for unusual items: salt in quantities far exceeding normal household consumption, iron nails by the pound with no corresponding carpentry projects, and multiple glass bottles of mercury, a substance commonly used in folk rituals throughout the rural South to ward off supernatural influences. The ledger's final pages, covering September 1903, list purchases of raw meat, liver, kidneys, and hearts from the town butcher Elias Morton. The quantities suggest a household of 12 or more, rather than the 3 Smith women. Morton's own records confirm these sales, with a note that Mrs. Smith specified the meat be fresh and still warm if possible. Young Mary had been removed from the schoolhouse on River Road shortly after her father's death. Town records show a formal withdrawal dated November 18, 1900, with home education cited as the reason. Her teacher, Miss Abigail Winters, noted in her class register, "A bright child, curious and well-spoken. Ashamed to lose her from our lessons. She has taken to watching the floor rather than the blackboard these past weeks." In a personal letter to her sister in Charleston, dated December 2, 1900, Winters elaborated on Mary's behavior in her final days at school. "The Smith girl grows stranger each day. She whispers to the floorboards during arithmetic lessons. Yesterday, I discovered her in the cloakroom after hours, pressing her ear to the wall. When I asked what she was doing, she replied, 'Listening to my other self.' The child needs spiritual guidance, in my opinion, or perhaps medical intervention." A diary belonging to Emma Thompson, who sat beside Mary in school, was donated to the Historical Society in 1964 after Emma's death. The childish handwriting recounts several disturbing interactions. "Mary S. told me there's another Mary under her house. She says this Mary is jealous because she's trapped in the dirt while our Mary gets to walk in the sunshine. I asked if the dirt Mary is a ghost. Mary has said no, she's something that never got to be a person at all." When Caldwell's team reached the foundation stones on October 4, 1903, they discovered something unusual. Beneath the original limestone blocks, which matched the architectural style of the 1880s when the house was reportedly built, a secondary wall had been constructed. The bricks were newer, stacked in an uneven pattern that suggested hasty work. Condensation beaded on the mortar, which appeared softer than expected, almost recently laid. Caldwell assumed it was a repair job, perhaps done by Jonathan before his death. Analysis of the bricks, conducted during the 1998 construction excavation, revealed they dated to approximately 1897 to 1898, based on manufacturing markers from the Augusta Brickworks. This timeline places their installation during the Smith family's occupancy, but with no corresponding construction permits filed with the county. More puzzling was the composition of the mortar itself. When samples were finally tested by the University of Georgia's Forensic Laboratory in 2005, results showed unusual organic compounds mixed into the standard lime and sand aggregate, specifically traces of animal blood and what the lab report carefully termed material consistent with human bone dust. Such additions had no structural purpose, but aligned with certain protective practices documented in both European and African folk traditions throughout the South. The crew's assignment log, filed at day's end, mentioned anomalous construction, secondary wall beneath original foundation, purpose unclear. No further investigation was deemed necessary at that point. The drainage work would continue as planned. At 2:17 p.m. on October 4th, a worker's shovel, wielded by James Harmon, age 22, the newest member of Caldwell's crew, cracked through the brick, revealing a hollow space behind. Harmon would later claim he felt a rush of cold air against his face, carrying a scent he couldn't identify, but that reminded him of his grandmother's sick room in her final days. Harmon's personal account, recorded 40 years later by his granddaughter Ruth for a school heritage project, adds a detail absent from official reports. "The moment my shovel broke through, I heard singing. A girl's voice, soft and sweet, like a lullaby half remembered. It stopped the instant Mr. Caldwell stepped closer to look. No one else admitted hearing it, so I kept quiet too. But I know what I heard. Someone was waiting behind that wall." The gap wasn't a typical foundation void. It was perfectly square, approximately 4 feet on each side. The air that escaped carried a sickly sweet odor, like overripe fruit and copper. Caldwell's notebook, stained with mud from that day, records his initial assessment. Possible root cellar or storage space, undocumented in house plans. Air quality poor, suggesting long enclosure. What Caldwell omitted from his official documentation, but confessed decades later to his nephew William during a bout of pneumonia he believed would be his last, was the movement he observed within the darkness. "Something shifted when the lantern light hit it," William quoted his uncle in a 1968 oral history recording. Not the chair or the doll, something behind them pressing against the edge of the light, something that pulled back when I leaned closer, something with outline but no substance. Inside, illuminated by lantern light, was a small wooden chair, child-sized, facing the wall. The chair was hand-carved oak, showing minimal decay despite the dampness that had affected the rest of the foundation. Beside it, a porcelain doll with painted eyes and a blue dress sat upright on the packed earth floor. Its face was turned away from the opening. The dress fabric, though dirty, appeared surprisingly intact. There was no expected deterioration for an item left in such conditions. Artistic renderings of the doll, created in 1974 based on deputy descriptions, show a style popular in the 1870s, significantly predating the Smith occupancy. The blue dress fabric was identified by textile experts as cotton calico, with a pattern discontinued by 1880. These details suggest the doll originated from the Campbell era, though no documentation confirms this conclusion. Most disturbing of all was the writing on the wall. In what appeared to be charcoal, in a child's unsteady hand, the same phrase repeated dozens of times from floor to ceiling. "Mary hears it too. Mary hears it too. Mary hears it too." Graphology expert Dr. Eleanor Pierce from Emory University consulted in 1987 when enhanced photographs of the writing were discovered in a misplaced evidence file, noted peculiarities in the script. The lettering exhibits characteristics of two distinct hands, one forming the words, "Mary hears," the other completing the phrase with, "it too." This suggests either collaboration between two writers or a single writer deliberately altering their natural hand mid-sentence, perhaps to create the impression of dialogue. Caldwell immediately ordered the site sealed and contacted Sheriff Howard Payne. His workers, visibly unsettled, abandoned their tools by the excavation and gathered at the street corner, unwilling to remain near the opening. Harmon, in particular, reportedly vomited into the drainage ditch they'd been digging. When questioned later, he could only say, "Something felt wrong about that air. Like breathing in someone else's breath." 3 of the 4 workers, Harmon, Gregory Lewis, and Peter Whitfield, resigned from the county drainage project the following day. County employment records show all 3 left Willow Creek within a month, relocating to separate states. Only Whitfield maintained contact with family in the area, though his letters, preserved by his sister Martha, never mentioned the events at the Smith house. Sheriff Payne arrived at 3:42 p.m., accompanied by his deputy Clarence Miller. The official report, filed later that evening, described the hidden room as, quote, "a concerning discovery of undetermined purpose." Payne noted the unusual nature of the construction, writing, "No visible access point from within the home, no door, no hatch. Walls show no signs of having been breached prior to today's excavation." Payne's personal journal, discovered among his effects after his death in 1928, contains a more candid assessment. "In my 17 years of law enforcement, I have never encountered a space that felt so immediately wrong. The air itself seemed dense, resistant to our presence." Deputy Miller's lantern dimmed upon entry, though there was no detectable draft. The small chair bore indentations in its seat, as though recently occupied. Most troubling was the soil itself. Despite weeks of flooding, the earth floor remained perfectly dry. Against all natural law, not a drop of moisture had penetrated this chamber. Photographic evidence was attempted, but the camera operated by Deputy Miller reportedly malfunctioned. The glass plate negative, developed later, showed only a dark smear, where the room's interior should have been visible. This technical failure was attributed to the poor lighting conditions and the dampness of the site. Miller's statement, appended to the official report, mentions 3 attempts with different exposure settings, all producing the same obscured result. "I have used this equipment successfully in far more challenging conditions," he noted. "The malfunction appears specific to this particular space." The handwriting on the wall was not matched to any member of the household, though samples for comparison were limited. An examination of Mary Smith's school primers, preserved by her mother, showed a different style of penmanship altogether. more controlled, more refined. The writing in the hidden room was described as frantic and increasingly compressed toward the ceiling, as if the author had been stretching to reach higher. When questioned, Sarah Smith claimed no knowledge of the room. Her hands trembled as she spoke, a detail noted by both Payne and Miller in their separate accounts. "That space should be solid ground," she insisted. "There is no room beneath our house." The county blueprints, consulted afterward, confirmed her statement. No basement or crawl space appeared in the original plans filed when Jonathan Smith purchased the property in 1892. What neither officer documented officially, but which Miller confided to his wife Elizabeth that evening, as recorded in her diary, now held in the county museum, was Sarah Smith's behavior when shown the porcelain doll recovered from the hidden room. "Clarence says Mrs. Smith turned white as a sheet," Elizabeth wrote. "She wouldn't touch the thing, wouldn't even look directly at it. But she knew what it was without being told where they'd found it. 'Put it back,' she kept saying. 'It's not supposed to come out yet.'" Mrs. Eliza Smith, the elderly mother-in-law, refused to leave her bedchamber during the investigation. Through the closed door, she called out only one statement: "The river takes what it wants. Best not to question it." She would not elaborate when pressed. Hospital records from Mercer County General show that Eliza Smith was admitted 3 weeks later, on October 27th, suffering from what attending physician Dr. Marcus Holcomb diagnosed as acute melancholia with paranoid features. His clinical notes describe her condition. Patient exhibits extreme hydrophobia, refusing all liquids to the point of dangerous dehydration, restraints required during bathing. Repeats phrase, "The first Mary is coming back," during periods of agitation, sedation only partially effective. Eliza never left the hospital. She died on November 15, 1903, officially of heart failure secondary to malnutrition. Nurse Beatrice Compton, however, recorded a different account in her private logbook. Mrs. Smith passed at 2:17 a.m., the exact moment the grandfather clock in the hall stopped ticking. Her final words, spoken with unexpected clarity after days of incoherence: "She's found a way out through the water." Within the hour, all the faucets in the west wing began to leak simultaneously. Maintenance found no mechanical cause. Young Mary remained silent throughout the initial interview, seated in the parlor with her hands folded in her lap. Sheriff Payne noted in his supplementary observations that the child stared fixedly at the floor during questioning, her lips moving without sound, as if in quiet conversation. When asked directly if she had ever been in the hidden room, she replied only, "It wasn't me who wrote it. It was the other Mary." No further explanation was offered or demanded. The child's pallor and apparent exhaustion led Sheriff Payne to conclude the interview earlier than planned. In his private notes, later donated to the County Historical Society by his widow, he wrote, "The child seems unwell, perhaps affected by the damp conditions. Though her eyes trouble me. Too alert, too knowing for one so young." A previously undiscovered document, found during the 2017 digitization of Willow Creek Elementary School records, adds context to Mary's condition during this period. School nurse Harriet Summers had conducted home visits for absent students, including one to the Smith residence on September 28, 1903, just days before the hidden room's discovery. Her report notes, "Child shows no physical symptoms of illness despite mother's claims of fever," observed Mary, whispering to herself while seated on kitchen floor. When approached, she stated she was feeding the voice its daily words. Recommend physician evaluation for possible nervous condition. The following morning, October 5th, Caldwell returned with 2 deputies to properly document the space. They found the opening resealed, not with brick, but with fresh poured concrete that hadn't been there the evening before. No one admitted to the work. No contractor claimed payment. The material appeared professionally mixed, yet no mason in Willow Creek reported supplying or placing it. The concrete bore unusual markings pressed into its surface while still wet, whorls and lines that formed no discernible pattern yet seemed deliberate. Deputy Miller made a sketch of these markings in his report, describing them as similar to fingerprints, but larger in scale and more complex in design. The sketch itself went missing from the case file in 1907, with only Miller's written description remaining. In 2009, during renovation of the county courthouse, workers discovered a metal lockbox hidden in a wall cavity behind the sheriff's former office. Inside was a collection of items Sheriff Payne had apparently concealed, including Miller's original sketch of the concrete markings. When compared with modern fingerprint analysis techniques, forensic specialist Dr. Raymond Chen confirmed the unsettling truth. The patterns were indeed fingerprints, dozens of them overlapping, all belonging to a single child-sized hand, pressed repeatedly into the wet concrete from below. Sarah Smith, when confronted about the mysterious resealing, became visibly agitated. "Leave it closed," she begged. "Some things should stay buried." She refused further questioning and took Mary to stay with relatives in Atlanta the following day. According to the station master's log at the Willow Creek depot, they boarded the 6:15 a.m. train, carrying only 2 small valises. They never returned to Willow Creek. Passenger manifests from the Southern Railway Company, archived in the Atlanta Historical Society collection, list Sarah and Mary Smith on the October 6 morning departure from Willow Creek. Their destination was recorded as Atlanta, with connecting passage to Savannah. However, station records from both destinations have no record of their arrival. No Smith matching their descriptions appears in any subsequent Atlanta or Savannah documentation, not in housing records, school registrations, employment files, or church memberships. The most recent discovery related to their disappearance came in 2020, when marine archaeologist Dr. Sophia Patel, researching shipwrecks off the Georgia coast, found a waterlogged trunk recovered from the merchant vessel Eastern Light, which sank during a storm on October 8, 1903, 2 days after the Smiths departed Willow Creek. Among the salvaged items was a child's primer bearing the inscription, "Property of Mary Catherine Smith, Willow Creek." Ticket stubs found in the same trunk confirm the Smiths had boarded the ill-fated vessel, presumably bound for an undocumented destination beyond Savannah. No bodies matching their descriptions were among those recovered from the wreck. Whether they perished in the sinking or somehow survived remains unknown. The drainage work along River Street continued without further incident, though Caldwell reported that his men refused to work directly adjacent to the Smith property. The crew relocated their equipment several yards downstream, leaving a conspicuous gap in the drainage system. When questioned by Commissioner Blackwood about this irregularity, Caldwell simply stated, "Some ground doesn't want to be disturbed." In the town's weekly newspaper, the Mercer County Chronicle, dated October 9th, a small notice appeared on page 7, "Repairs to the Smith residence postponed indefinitely. Property to be listed for sale by month's end." The article, unsigned and set in small type, made no mention of the hidden room, the writings, or the doll. It concluded with a curious phrase, "Inquiries regarding the Southern Foundation are respectfully declined." Archives of the Chronicle reveal that managing editor Winston Clark had initially prepared a more detailed article about the discovery. The original draft, preserved in his personal papers donated to the Mercer Historical Society in 1951, described the hidden room and mentioned strange writings concerning the youngest Smith child. Publisher Gerald Hayes rejected the piece, replacing it with the abbreviated notice. In a margin note, Hayes wrote, "Some stories invite trouble by their telling. Best left to fade." The house remained vacant until 1907, when it was purchased by the Whitaker family, recent arrivals from Tennessee who knew nothing of its history. Edward Whitaker, a banker newly employed at Mercer County Trust, moved in with his wife, Virginia, and their 3 sons. During renovations to modernize the kitchen, workers discovered the concrete seal had cracked along its center, a thin fissure from which a faint humming could be heard on quiet nights. Construction foreman Lloyd Parker's bid documents, filed with the county permits office, detail his team's discovery: unusual concrete formation beneath kitchen floorboards, approximately 4 times 4, not aligned with any support beam or foundation necessity. Concrete shows stress fracture, recent in appearance. Client requested we cover rather than remove. Installed new subflooring directly over existing structure. According to Virginia Whitaker's diary, recovered during the estate sale following her death in 1945, the family covered the concrete with a cast iron stove and never spoke of it again. One entry, dated November 12, 1907, reads, "Edward has forbidden the boys from entering the kitchen after sunset. The noise from beneath the stove has grown louder. He claims it's merely the pipes settling, but we have no pipes that run beneath that corner. I've begun to hear my name at night, so faint I might be dreaming it. Always, just as I drift towards sleep, a whisper, Virginia." Subsequent entries document a rapid deterioration in the family's well-being. On December 3rd, Virginia wrote, "George, her eldest son, aged 12, woke screaming that someone was under his bed. Edward found him in the kitchen at dawn, ear pressed to the floor beneath the stove. The boy claimed someone named Mary had been telling him secrets all night. We've decided he should spend the winter with my sister in Charleston." By February 1908, all 3 Whitaker boys had been sent to stay with relatives. Virginia's increasingly erratic handwriting chronicles her isolation. The house feels both empty and too full at once. Edward works late most evenings. I sit alone, listening to what he refuses to acknowledge. The voice knows things it shouldn't. Private conversations, childhood memories, the names I considered for children never born. Last night it spoke in Edward's voice while he was still at the bank, calling me to the kitchen. I nearly answered before I realized the deception. The Whitakers remained in the house for 12 years, though Virginia's diary entries grow increasingly sparse after 1908. The final page, dated March 3, 1909, contains only one line. It knows the boys, names now, too. County tax records show the Whitakers continued to pay property taxes on the River Street house until 1919, though neighbors reported the family spent increasingly little time there. Shopkeeper Millicent Bradford told the Mercer Chronicle in 1910 that Virginia Whitaker had taken to sleeping at the Willow Creek Hotel 3 nights a week, claiming, quote, "household repairs made the home temporarily uninhabitable." Medical records from Dr. Thaddeus Wilson, the Whitakers' family physician, document Virginia's declining health during this period. His notes describe symptoms including insomnia, weight loss, and nervous exhaustion. One troubling entry from July 1912 reads, "Mrs. W. exhibits unusual bruising on both ankles, circular in pattern. Claims no knowledge of injury. Pattern resembles grip marks, as if patient had been physically restrained, yet she lives alone most days. Prescribed rest and mild sedative." In 1919, Edward Whitaker accepted a position at a bank in Savannah, relocating his family with unusual haste. The house sold for well below market value to Jeremiah Powell, a widower with no children. Powell lived there alone until his death in 1927, at which point the property reverted to the county due to lack of heirs. County real estate transactions show Powell purchased the house for less than half its assessed value. The contract included an unusual addendum. Powell agreed to never remove the kitchen stove or alter the flooring beneath it. The document bears Edward Whitaker's signature, along with a notarized statement that he had fully disclosed the property's unique characteristics to the buyer. Powell, a retired accountant with no previous connection to Willow Creek, maintained minimal contact with the community during his 8 years in the house. Church attendance records from First Baptist show he appeared only for Christmas and Easter services. Neighbors described him as reclusive but polite, often seen tending his garden but rarely engaging in conversation. A curious footnote to Powell's residency emerged in 1963, when his personal effects, stored in the county courthouse basement following his intestate death, were finally cataloged as part of a records modernization initiative. Among his belongings was a small notebook in which he had apparently recorded unusual occurrences in the house. Most entries were mundane: creaking floorboards, a window that wouldn't stay latched, temperature fluctuations in the kitchen. Beginning in April 1925, however, the entries took a darker turn. Powell began documenting what he termed the conversations. describing how he would hear his deceased wife Rebecca's voice emanating from beneath the kitchen stove. Initially, he attributed this to grief-induced hallucinations. As months passed, the entries show his skepticism giving way to acceptance, then anticipation. April 23, 1925. The voice came again tonight. Sounds exactly like Rebecca, though she's been gone these 20 years. Asked about my garden plans for spring, just as she used to. Doctor says it's my mind playing tricks, seeking comfort. Perhaps. June 17, 1925. Voice spoke for nearly an hour tonight. Knew things only Rebecca would know. Where she hid her mother's silver during the war. The name of our stillborn son we told no one. Can't explain it. Don't want to. September 4th, 1925. I've started waiting for her each evening. Sitting on the kitchen floor like a fool, but I don't care. Sometimes I imagine I can see her shadow moving behind the stove when the light is low. Voice suggests I might join her if I wish. Says there's a way. The final entry, dated 3 days before his death from what the coroner ruled apoplexy, reads, "It has learned to mimic my Rebecca's voice. Coming from the kitchen floor, sweet as the day we wed, I know it cannot be her. She lies in Prescott Hill Cemetery these 20 years, yet I find myself answering back in the dark. God forgive me." County Coroner Ellis Hammond's report on Powell's death contains several troubling inconsistencies. Though officially attributed to apoplexy, the document notes, quotes, unusual contusions encircling both ankles and wrists, consistent with ligature restraints. Additionally, Powell's body was discovered in the kitchen, not in his bedroom as would be expected for a nighttime medical episode. Most perplexing was Hammond's observation that, quote, floor beneath body shows evidence of recent excavation, approximately 6 to 8 inches depth. Subject's fingernails contain soil consistent with manual digging. The report's conclusion dismisses these anomalies, stating that Powell likely fell during a dizzy spell and disturbed the flooring in his confusion. Hammond recommended immediate burial without further investigation, an unusual hastiness that local physician Dr. Wilson questioned in a letter to the state medical board. No response to his inquiry appears in county records. In 1928, a county clerk named Marion Everett, cataloging historical property records, came across a curious document misfiled among tax assessments. It was a medical journal belonging to Jonathan Smith, previously unreported in his estate inventory. The leather-bound volume contained patient notes spanning from 1890 to 1900, written in Smith's precise, measured hand. Most entries concerned routine matters, treatments for influenza, broken bones set, births attended. But beginning in June of 1900, a different pattern emerged. Smith began documenting observations of his daughter Mary, interspersed with his regular patient notes. June 17, 1900. Mary claims to hear voices from beneath the kitchen floor. Likely childhood fancy, though her insistence is troubling. Have administered mild sedative. July 2, 1900 M. Still fixated on the supposed voice. Now claims it knows her name. Sarah suggests removing her from school temporarily. Perhaps the stimulation of too many lessons has overexcited her mind. August 14, 1900. Disturbed from sleep by M. Found her in kitchen after midnight, ear pressed to floor, whispering. When questioned, she said she was, answering the other Mary. Most concerning. As summer progressed, Smith's entries grew increasingly frantic. His once meticulous handwriting became irregular, with ink blots and crossed-out passages suggesting a troubled mind. He began documenting his own experiences. August 28, 1900, heard it myself tonight, faint but unmistakable. A child's voice singing beneath the kitchen. Sarah denies hearing anything. Claims I'm working too hard. Perhaps she's right. September 11, 1900. Voice growing louder. Spoke my name tonight. Sarah finally admits she hears it too. We've agreed to consult historical records regarding previous occupants of this land. There must be a rational explanation. September 19, 1900, County Archives show troubling history. Campbell child disappeared 1873. No body recovered. Previous owner sealed off kitchen floor before selling. Voice has stopped singing. Now it just whispers, always after midnight, always the same message, I'm still here. The final entry, dated September 30th, 1900, the day of Jonathan Smith's death, contained a troubling passage. M claims to hear the voice again. It comes from below the south corner, she says. It knows her name and speaks it in the night. I have told S to keep her away from that section of the house. Tomorrow I will investigate the source myself. I fear what I might find. The journal was logged as evidence, but subsequently disappeared from county archives in 1931. Its current whereabouts remain unknown. Marion Everett, who discovered the document, requested a transfer to the tax office shortly afterward, refusing to continue archival work in the courthouse basement. What was not publicly known until the 2012 release of sealed courthouse records was that Everett had made a handwritten copy of Smith's journal before its disappearance. This copy, hidden among her personal papers and discovered only after her death in 1967, included entries from the final pages that had never been officially documented. September 27, 1900 afternoon, have determined to excavate beneath kitchen floor tonight. Sarah objects strenuously, but cannot deny what we all hear now. Even Eliza admits the voice has grown too persistent to ignore. I've borrowed digging tools from clinic storage. September 27, 1900, night. God help us. Removed floorboards after household retired. Dug approximately 2 feet down. Found small blue shoe, child-sized, identical to style worn in daguerreotypes of Campbell girl. As I lifted it from earth, voice spoke clearly. Not from below now, but directly in my ear. I've been waiting for a doctor. Replaced boards. Will consult Reverend Hartley tomorrow regarding possible spiritual intervention. September 30th, 1900, early morning. Voice called to me all night. Not from kitchen now, from examination room. Says it needs medical attention. Says it's been buried too long. Sarah begs me not to return to clinic today. But I must. It knows I can hear it. It will not be silenced. This final entry was dated mere hours before Jonathan Smith was found dead. Meanwhile, the chair and doll recovered from the hidden room were stored in the sheriff's evidence lockup. In 1934, during a routine inventory conducted by Sheriff Wesley Graham, Payne's successor, deputies noted that the chair had been turned to face the door of the evidence room, rather than the wall as originally positioned. The doll was missing entirely. No break-in was reported. No explanation was ever found. Evidence room logs show the items had been undisturbed for years. The last documented examination occurred in 1927, when visiting archaeological consultant Dr. Henry Blackburn from the University of Virginia requested access to artifacts related to the Smith case. His notes, preserved in the university archives, describe the chair as an unremarkable example of mid-19th century child's furniture, though unusually well preserved. The doll he detailed as porcelain head and limbs with cloth body, typical of 1870s manufacture, with unusual modifications to the chest cavity, appears to have been opened and restitched with non-standard thread. Blackburn's analysis included one other observation. Both artifacts maintain temperature significantly below ambient surroundings. Thermometer registers 8 degrees Fahrenheit cooler when placed in direct contact. No scientific explanation for this property is immediately evident. Deputy Leonard Simmons, who conducted the 1934 inventory, resigned the following week. His letter of resignation, preserved in county employment records, cited only, quote, personal reasons, though rumors persisted that he had refused to enter the evidence room again. Local newspaper The Mercer Chronicle ran a small article on January 18, 1935, noting the missing doll. The piece mentioned that 3 separate searches of the evidence room had failed to locate it, though the locked cabinet showed no signs of tampering. Sheriff Graham offered a modest reward for information, but no leads materialized. What the article omitted, based on newsroom notes from reporter Daniel Hayes found decades later, was Simmons' claim that he had heard a child's humming emanating from the evidence cabinet the day before discovering the doll's absence. Hayes interviewed Simmons but was instructed by editor Winston Clark to remove this unverifiable and sensationalist claim from the published piece. The most chilling connection came to light in 1972 when an elderly woman named Mary Elizabeth Prescott contacted the Mercer Historical Society. In a letter postmarked from a nursing home in Savannah, she identified herself as Mary Smith, now in her late 70s. The handwriting, compared with school primers preserved in the historical collection, appeared to match that of the child who had lived in the River Street house in 1903. Mary Prescott requested access to her childhood home, which had been demolished following a fire in 1949 that consumed half the structure. The lot had remained vacant since, with various development proposals rejected by the town council for reasons never clearly articulated in public records. When Historical Society Director Francis Lambert responded, asking why, after all these years, Mary wished to return, her response was recorded verbatim. "To see if she's still there, the other Mary, the one beneath the bricks, the one who knew my name before I did." Lambert arranged to meet Mary Prescott, traveling to Savannah on October 3, 1972. According to Lambert's field notes, Mary appeared physically frail, but mentally sharp. She spoke lucidly of her childhood in Willow Creek, recalling details about the town that matched historical records. When the conversation turned to the house on River Street, however, her demeanor changed markedly. Lambert described her as suddenly distant, speaking in a monotone, eyes fixed on middle distance. Mary recounted how, beginning in the summer of 1900, she had begun hearing a voice calling to her from beneath the kitchen floor. At first, it was unintelligible, merely a rhythmic humming. Gradually, it formed words, then sentences. "It knew things it shouldn't have," Mary told Lambert. "My secret names. The ones I called myself when no one was listening. It knew about the kitten I'd buried in the garden after it was born stillborn. Things no one could have known." She described how her father had initially dismissed her claims, until one night when he heard it too, a child's voice singing a lullaby that had been passed down through the Smith family for generations. A song Mary claimed she had never sung aloud in that house. Mary reported that on the evening before Jonathan Smith's death, she had awakened to find him in the kitchen, kneeling on the floor with an oil lamp beside him, his ear pressed to the boards. He was answering it, she said, talking back like they were old friends. The next morning he was found dead in his examination room. What Lambert found most disturbing, however, was Mary's account of the hidden room discovered in 1903. According to Mary, it hadn't been a surprise to her at all. "Mother built it," she told Lambert, "after Father died. Said we needed a place to keep the other Mary contained. She'd been breaking through in other ways, through dreams, through mirrors. The room was supposed to give her space of her own, so she'd leave us alone." Mary claimed her mother had performed what she called the feeding ritual each night, placing small offerings through a concealed opening in the kitchen floor. At first, it was just food scraps and thimbles of water. Later, as the voice grew more insistent, Sarah Smith began leaving more personal items. Locks of Mary's hair, drops of her blood, whispered secrets and confessions. "Mother said the other Mary needed pieces of me to stay satisfied," Mary explained. "Said she'd take all of me if we didn't give her portions freely. I believed her. I could feel myself disappearing a little each time." Most disturbing was Mary's account of the night before she and her mother fled to Atlanta. She claimed to have crept downstairs after midnight, drawn by what she described as the pull of a familiar voice. In the kitchen, she found her mother on her knees before a section of floor that had been pried up, revealing exposed earth beneath. "Mother was feeding it," Mary told Lambert. "Little bits of meat pushed into the dirt, whispering to it like you would to calm a baby. When she saw me watching, she grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. It knows we tried to keep it quiet," she said. "It won't be ignored anymore." The following morning, they boarded the train for Atlanta. Mary told Lambert they traveled constantly after that day, never staying in one place more than a few months. Sarah Smith died in 1920, reportedly of tuberculosis, though Mary's description suggested a wasting illness that doctors had been unable to diagnose properly. Lambert's notes indicate Mary became increasingly agitated as their interview progressed. Her final disclosure concerned the shipwreck of 1903. "We never boarded that vessel," she insisted. Mother purchased the tickets to establish our path, but we traveled inland instead, under different names. She was convinced it could track us over water. Said it lived in anything that flowed, rivers, pipes, blood. We changed our name so it couldn't call to us anymore. When Lambert asked why, after nearly 70 years of hiding, Mary had decided to reveal herself, the elderly woman simply said, "Because I hear her again. After all this time, she's found me somehow. She whispers in the water pipes at night. She says it's time to come home." Mary Prescott died 3 days after her interview with Lambert, in her sleep at the nursing home. The coroner noted unusual markings on her palms, whorls and lines pressed into the skin, as if she had pressed her hands against wet concrete shortly before her passing. The patterns, photographed for the medical report, bore striking resemblance to Deputy Miller's description of the markings found on the concrete seal in 1903. The nursing home staff reported one other anomaly. In the hours before her death, Mary had repeatedly whispered a name, not her own, but Margaret. No person by that name was employed at the facility or listed among her known associates. When Lambert returned to Willow Creek and presented her findings to the Historical Society Board, she encountered unexpected resistance. Chairman Richard Blackwood, grandson of the commissioner who had ordered the drainage work in 1903, moved to classify all materials related to the Smith-Prescott interview as restricted. The motion passed unanimously. Lambert was instructed to surrender her notes and recordings, which were sealed in the Society's secure archives. Lambert resigned her position the following month. In her letter to the board, she wrote only, "I cannot participate in the continued concealment of a matter that has claimed too many lives already. The truth will surface as surely as water finds its level." She died in 1975 of an apparent stroke. Her personal papers, examined afterward, contained no copies of the restricted Prescott materials, but did include a curious note written the night before her death. "It knows my name now, too." In 1998, during construction of a shopping center on the former site of the Smith property, workers uncovered a small iron box buried approximately 6 feet below the surface, directly beneath where the kitchen would have stood. The box, roughly the size of a cigar case, was sealed with what appeared to be beeswax around its edges. Construction foreman Dale Tucker contacted the Mercer Historical Society rather than the authorities, recalling the site's connection to local legends. Society director Martin Chin documented the box's opening under controlled conditions, filming the process for the historical record. Inside was a child's journal, the pages brittle with age but remarkably preserved. The name inscribed on the flyleaf was Mary Catherine Smith, with a date of April 12, 1899, presumably her 10th birthday, based on census records. Most entries were mundane accounts of daily life in turn-of-the-century Willow Creek, lessons learned, Sunday services attended, small quarrels with neighborhood children. The tone shifted dramatically in entries dating from late August 1900. The handwriting became increasingly erratic, the content more disturbed. August 27th. I dreamed of the girl in the floor again. She says her name is Mary, too. She says she was here first. She says this was her house before it was mine. I told Mother, but she said it was just a nightmare. September 10th, I asked Father about the other Mary today. He went very quiet, then said there had been a family named Campbell here before us. They had a daughter who went missing. When I asked if her name was Mary, he made me promise never to speak of it again. September 15th. Father says I mustn't speak of Mary below anymore. He gets angry when I mention her. But I hear him in the night, talking to the floor when he thinks everyone is asleep. September 22nd. The voice is getting louder. It doesn't just whisper now. It sings. It laughs. Sometimes I wake up standing in the kitchen with no memory of leaving my bed. Mother found me there last night, my ear pressed to the floor. I told her I was listening to my friend. She slapped me for the first time ever. September 28th. I hear her calling again. Mother says it's just the pipes, but we don't have pipes in that corner. She knows my name. She says she's the first Mary. The real Mary. October 1st, Father went to look. He didn't come back right away. When he did, he wouldn't speak about it. He locked his study door. I heard him crying. October 3rd, she says father found her bones. She says he put them back. She's angry now. She says if I don't help her, she'll take my voice too. I don't want to go down there again. The journal ended abruptly. Several pages appeared to have been torn out. Soil analysis of the iron box revealed traces of the same red clay found throughout Mercer County, but with an unusual chemical composition, elevated levels of iron oxide and calcium, consistent with prolonged exposure to bone material. Forensic testing on the journal itself yielded startling results. The ink analysis confirmed its age as authentic to the period. However, fingerprint recovery from the final pages revealed overlapping prints from two different individuals, both children, based on size and ridge pattern. One set matched samples taken from Mary Smith's school primers. The other belonged to an unknown individual. Most unsettling was the discovery made by document specialist Dr. Leanne Harper, who detected indentations on the final page, impressions left by writing on a page now missing. Using specialized lighting and enhancement techniques, she was able to recover portions of the missing text. She can wear my skin when I'm not using it. She can borrow my voice. But she promised to give them back. She promised we could take turns being alive. Martin Chen's report, filed with both the Historical Society and the County Sheriff's Office, recommended a formal archaeological survey of the site. His request was denied. Construction resumed within a week, with a concrete foundation poured directly over the area where the box had been discovered. Chen, disturbed by the decision, retained unauthorized copies of his documentation. In 2003, he published a scholarly article in the Journal of Southern Folklore detailing his findings, carefully anonymizing locations and names to avoid legal repercussions. The article, titled Liminal Voices, Folklore of Contained Entities in Georgia Architecture, gained little attention outside academic circles. 3 months after publication, Chen resigned from the Historical Society and relocated to Oregon. Former colleagues reported he had grown increasingly paranoid, claiming to hear children's voices in the Society's basement archives. His current whereabouts are unknown. The shopping center was completed in 2000, anchored by a national grocery chain. Within the first year of operation, 3 night shift employees independently reported hearing what they described as a child singing from the store's massive walk-in freezer, located almost exactly where the Smith kitchen had once stood. All 3 employees resigned within a month of their reports. Store management initially attributed the sounds to mechanical issues with the refrigeration system. Multiple service calls failed to identify any malfunction. Eventually, a white noise system was installed throughout the store's back areas, ostensibly to, quote, mask disruptive equipment sounds. Employees report the singing stopped, or at least became inaudible beneath the constant static. The case was never formally closed, as it had never been officially recognized as a criminal matter. To this day, older residents of Willow Creek report a peculiar phenomenon. On rainy autumn nights, when water runs high along what was once River Street, now Riverside Drive, they say you can hear a child's voice whispering from storm drains and basement windows. It speaks just one word, over and over: Mary. What remains unexplained is the census record from 1870, discovered during a digitization project in 2012 by Mercer County archivist Rebecca Holloway. The document lists the original occupants of the land where the Smith property would later be built, then a small farmhouse owned by the Campbell family. Among them, a daughter, Mary Campbell, age 7, who reportedly went missing during a heavy rainfall in 1873. According to a brief newspaper account in the Mercer Gazette, dated July 18, 1873, the child had last been seen playing near the riverside. It was assumed she had fallen into the swollen waters and drowned. Her body was never recovered. The case was eventually forgotten. Holloway's continued research uncovered something the town had collectively forgotten, or deliberately obscured. The initial newspaper report of Mary Campbell's disappearance mentioned search parties combing the riverbanks for 3 days without success. A follow-up article dated July 25, 1873, however, took a different tone. Search suspended at family's request. Campbell child still missing, presumed claimed by Waters. Family asks community to respect their grief and cease further inquiry. This abrupt termination of the search struck Holloway as unusual. Digging deeper into county archives, she discovered sheriff's notes documenting a curious statement from Elizabeth Campbell, the missing girl's mother. When questioned about ending the search, she reportedly said, "She isn't in the river. She's beneath the house, but what's down there isn't Mary anymore." The sheriff dismissed these comments as the ravings of a grief-stricken mother. The investigation was closed. Tax records show the Campbell family abandoned the property less than a month later, selling it significantly below market value to the First National Bank. They relocated to Alabama, leaving most of their possessions behind, a detail noted as unusual in the deed transfer documents. The house remained vacant until 1892, when Jonathan Smith purchased it. Until another Mary moved in. Until the voice found her name. Until the walls remembered what they had been built to contain. But the story doesn't end there. In 2015, during renovations to expand the grocery store, workers discovered something troubling beneath the freezer floor. Breaking through the concrete to install new drainage pipes, they uncovered a small cavity containing what appeared to be human remains, specifically the partial skeleton of a child, estimated by the forensic anthropologist to have died between ages 6 and 8. The bones showed signs of having been previously disturbed and reburied. Most were present, but the skull was conspicuously absent. In its place was a porcelain doll head, cracked along one side, with painted blue eyes. The rest of the doll was missing. The similarity to the doll described in the 1903 investigation was noted, though no definitive connection could be established. Construction supervisor Travis McKinney, first to witness the discovery, described an additional detail omitted from official reports. "When we broke through into that pocket of air, there was this sound, like a long, slow exhale." Jenkins, another worker, swore he felt something brush past him, like a cool breeze but somehow solid. "We all felt it. Like something that had been held down for a long time was finally getting out." DNA testing proved inconclusive due to the age and condition of the remains. Without the skull, identification was impossible. The bones were eventually interred in Prescott Hill Cemetery under a simple marker reading, "Child of Willow Creek, 1866 to 1873?" The question mark was added at the insistence of the forensic team, who could not determine a precise year of death. What troubles investigators to this day is the condition of the bones. Despite having been buried in damp soil for potentially over a century, they showed little of the expected deterioration. The forensic report described them as unusually preserved, with minimal expected decomposition. No explanation for this anomaly was offered. More disturbing still was the small cloth pouch found clutched in the skeletal hand, a drawstring bag made of faded blue cotton, similar to material used for children's dresses in the late 19th century. Inside were 3 objects: a small brass key that matched no known lock in the historical record, a child's milk tooth, and a folded paper containing a lock of blonde hair tied with thread. Written on the paper in faint, faded ink was a name, Margaret Mary Campbell. Census records from 1870 list the Campbell child only as Mary. The middle name, Margaret, appears in no official documentation. Forensic analyst Stephanie Winters, who examined the cloth pouch, reported an unusual phenomenon not included in the official findings. In her personal research journal, later shared with colleague Dr. Raymond Chen, she noted, "Item retains unexplainable moisture despite controlled laboratory conditions. Fabric remains damp to touch even after 72 hours in dehumidified environment. Liquid tests negative for all standard biological fluids, most similar to fresh groundwater in composition." The mystery deepened in 2018 when Rebecca Holloway, continuing her archival work, discovered an unusual baptismal record in the First Baptist Church archives. Dated May 4, 1866, it recorded the christening of twin girls born to Thomas and Elizabeth Campbell, Mary and Margaret, identical in appearance and baptized together. Yet every subsequent record census documents, school registries, family correspondence mentions only a single daughter, Mary. No death certificate for Margaret exists. No grave marker bears her name. It is as if she simply vanished from the historical record, remembered only in that single church document. Further investigation by Holloway uncovered a private letter written by Reverend Simeon Clark, who performed the Campbell twins' baptism. Writing to a theological colleague in Charleston in November 1866, Clark expressed unease about the family. Something troubling about the Campbell situation. Twin girls, identical in every feature, yet parents adamantly introduce only one child in public settings. When questioned, they claim Mary and Margaret are names for the same child, used interchangeably. I observe, however, subtle differences in the child when presented, sometimes lively and verbal, other times silent and watchful. Almost as if two different children inhabit the same small form. The letter continues with an observation that Holloway found particularly chilling. Most disturbing is my growing certainty that I never see both aspects of the child simultaneously. It's as if Mary and Margaret take turns emerging into the world, one always hidden while the other walks in sunlight. Unless, perhaps, she never left at all. In 2019, night manager David Winslow reported a strange incident at the grocery store. Reviewing security footage from the previous evening, he noticed a small figure moving through the freezer section after closing hours, when the store should have been empty. The figure appeared to be a child in an old-fashioned dress, though the image was blurred and indistinct. Most unsettling was what happened when the figure reached the back wall of the freezer. Rather than turning away, it seemed to step forward and vanish into the solid surface. Technical experts who examined the footage found no evidence of tampering, but could not explain the visual anomaly. The security company suggested the blur might be condensation on the camera lens or a reflection from the freezer lights. This explanation satisfied corporate management, who ordered no further investigation. Store employees remained unconvinced. Winslow resigned his position the following week. His resignation letter contained a single sentence beyond the standard formalities. I can't keep pretending I don't hear them talking to each other through the wall. 3 months later, Winslow was admitted to Mercer County General Hospital's psychiatric ward after what police reports described as, quote, a public disturbance. According to witnesses at the Riverside Diner, Winslow had begun screaming that someone named Mary was standing behind him, whispering in his ear, though no one was visible. When restrained by fellow patrons, he reportedly begged them to look at the water in his glass, claiming he could see a child's face reflected there. Hospital records show he was released after 72 hours of observation, diagnosed with acute stress reaction and prescribed anti-anxiety medication. His current location is unknown. The last documented development in this strange case comes from Amelia Smith, no relation to the original Smith family, a graduate student in folklore studies who visited Willow Creek in 2021 to research local legends. While interviewing elderly resident Florence Blackwood, age 93, granddaughter of the county commissioner who had ordered the drainage work in 1903, she recorded a chilling account. Florence claimed that according to family stories passed down through generations, the Campbell twins had been inseparable in life. When Margaret fell ill with diphtheria in the winter of 1873, Mary refused to leave her side, despite the risk of contagion. After Margaret's death, Mary was inconsolable. The story goes, Florence told Amelia that little Mary started telling folks her sister was still talking to her, not from heaven or anything proper like that. From under the floor, from the dirt beneath the house. Their parents thought it was just grief talking. Then Mary went missing. According to Florence, the town assumed Mary had drowned in the river, but her grandfather had told a different story. That Thomas Campbell, driven half mad with grief, had torn up the kitchen floor one night, convinced he heard his daughters conversing beneath it. He found something there, Florence said. Not Mary. Something that spoke with her voice, something that had been waiting in that spot long before any house was built. Grandfather wouldn't say what Campbell did after that, only that when they rebuilt years later, nobody wanted that plot of land. Nobody but Dr. Smith, who didn't know the stories. Florence's account included a detail absent from all official records: a folk ritual reportedly performed by Elizabeth Campbell before the family fled. "She made a doll," Florence said, "crafted it to look like both girls at once, placed inside it items belonging to each twin: hair, nail clippings, baby teeth. It was meant as a vessel, somewhere for Margaret to live besides underneath the house. They buried it at the property line as they left, a peace offering of sorts." When asked why this account had never been recorded in any official capacity, Florence simply replied, "Some stories aren't meant for writing down. Some you only whisper, and only once, so they don't take root in the telling." What Florence couldn't know was that the doll head found with the child's remains in 2015 matched the description of the one her family's oral history described, right down to the crack along the left side, reportedly made when Thomas Campbell struck it with a shovel during burial. Amelia Smith's research notes end abruptly after this interview. Her thesis project was abandoned midway through the semester. University records indicate she withdrew from her program, citing health concerns. 3 months later, Amelia's roommate reported her missing to campus police. According to the incident report, Amelia had become increasingly paranoid in the weeks following her Willow Creek research trip. She claimed to hear a child's voice calling her name from sink drains and shower pipes. The roommate reported finding her multiple times in the bathroom, ear pressed to the wall behind the toilet, whispering to what she called the sisters. Amelia's laptop, examined by investigators, contained hundreds of pages of notes about the Willow Creek case, far more detailed than her academic project required. The final document, dated the night of her disappearance, contained only one line: "They're not two girls. They were never twins. It just learned to divide itself. And now it's learning to multiply." The investigation into Amelia's disappearance remains open. Her belongings were returned to her parents in Ohio, with the exception of one item: a small blue drawstring pouch found beneath her mattress, identical to the one recovered with the skeletal remains in 2015. Inside was a child's tooth, a brass key, and a lock of blonde hair. The object was logged as evidence, then inexplicably misplaced during transfer between departments. Its current location is unknown. The grocery store continues to operate at the site, though employee turnover remains unusually high. Local teenagers occasionally dare one another to press their ears to the freezer wall after hours, listening for voices from within. Most hear nothing. Some report a faint humming, like a child's lullaby sung just below the threshold of comprehension. A few claim to hear something more: 2 voices, young and feminine, calling a name over and over. Not Mary, not anymore. They call for Amelia. They say they've been waiting for her. They say she belongs with them, beneath the floor, where the first voice has always lived, where it learned to speak the names of those who listen too closely, too long. Where it waits, even now, for someone new to whisper back. In January 2023, plumbing issues at the grocery store necessitated breaking through the concrete floor yet again. Workers reported water backing up through the drains in the freezer section, flooding the area with foul-smelling liquid. City engineers, consulting original drainage maps, discovered that despite multiple renovations, no one had ever properly connected the building to the main sewage line. The store had been constructed directly over the 1903 drainage project, which had remained unfinished at the Smith property section. Lead engineer Tyrone Washington documented an inexplicable finding. The backed-up water contained trace elements not found in municipal supplies, including iron oxide concentrations suggesting the water had been trapped underground for decades, possibly centuries. More troubling were the organic components: microscopic bone fragments, and what lab technicians identified as preserved epithelial cells, the kind found in human skin. The water moved wrong, Washington noted in his field report. It seemed to flow against gravity, seeping upward through minute cracks rather than draining away as physics demanded. His team had to pump it out continuously as they worked, otherwise it would rise around their ankles, unnaturally warm despite the freezer's cold. During excavation, Washington's team uncovered something embedded in the soil beneath the concrete: a child's blue dress, remarkably preserved despite its age. The fabric, when tested, dated to approximately 1870. Most unsettling was the embroidery along the collar. 2 names stitched side by side in white thread, Mary and Margaret. The dress was removed for further analysis, but disappeared from the evidence locker that night. Security footage showed no unauthorized entry. The dress simply vanished between scheduled checks, leaving behind only a small puddle of water on the metal shelf. 3 days after this discovery, Rebecca Holloway, the archivist who had been piecing together the Campbell twins' mystery, was found unconscious in the county records basement. Medical reports indicate she had suffered a stroke, though at 42 she had no prior health concerns or risk factors. Upon regaining consciousness a week later, she could no longer speak. Her only means of communication became writing, but the messages were often incoherent. One note, however, written during a moment of apparent clarity, troubled her doctors enough to contact authorities. It rises through water. It remembers through flesh. It has learned to divide and multiply. First Mary, then Margaret, then all the others. Now it wears my tongue. It knows your names too. Holloway died 3 weeks later of a second, more severe stroke. An autopsy, performed at her family's insistence, revealed an unusual anomaly: microscopic bone fragments embedded throughout her brain tissue, identical in composition to those found in the water beneath the grocery store. The medical examiner could offer no explanation for their presence. The store closed permanently in June 2023, citing structural concerns. The building was demolished 2 months later. Plans for redevelopment have stalled repeatedly due to persistent drainage issues. The land remains vacant, surrounded by chain-link fencing and warning signs. Locals avoid the area, particularly after rainfall. They say the ground there never quite dries. Puddles form in strange patterns, sometimes resembling childish handprints or small footsteps leading nowhere. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, especially in autumn when the rain comes heavy, you might hear what generations of Willow Creek residents have heard: a child's voice rising from beneath the earth, calling a name. It might be Mary, it might be Margaret, it might be Amelia, or it might be yours. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back. Because the voice in the basement is still whispering, and it knows what name will make you answer back.